Alright, continue on with 5.4. This is 5.4b. Run out of batteries on my video and I have to shut things down real quick before I lose everything. So, what we did last is we showed that before we divide, this has to be a whole number, which means we have to move this decimal over 1 to be a whole number, and we also move this decimal over 1 to be consistent. So let's erase that, and then we just divide through just like we did prior. And so we've got 38 divided into 313.5, so 38 goes into 313 8 times. And 8 times 38 ends up being 304. And we end up with 9 left over. We bring down our 5. 38 goes into 95 twice. 2 times 38 is 76. We subtract there and get 19. We brought down our 5 here, so we don't have any more numbers to bring down, even though we have a 19 as a remainder. So we put a 0 on there and bring the 0 down. So then we have 38 goes into 190. 5 times 38 is 190. And we end up with 0 for a remainder, just going one step further and bringing down the 0 here. So 8.25 is the answer we end up with. Alright, so let's look at example 6 on the bottom of page 383. We have a 0.3778, and we're going to divide it by 0.25. So in this case, we have a 0.25. In order to make this a whole number, we need to move it over twice. So we'll just write it as a 25. We can just kind of put a decimal there so you can see that we moved it twice. And we have to move this one over twice. So this is actually 37.78. Okay, one of the key things you need to remember is when you divide out, you don't, with your answer, move that decimal back to where it was originally. When you moved it over like this, it stays there. And again, once it's up here like this, you forget that it's there and you divide as if you didn't even need it. So in this particular one, we get 1, we get 25, and we get 127 because we bring down the 7. 25 goes into 127 5 times 125, and we get 2. We bring down our 8. 25 goes into 28 once. We get 25, and we get 3 as our remainder. So now we start bringing down zeros. But what happens when we bring down our 0? 25 goes into 30 once again. We multiply. We don't zero out, we just keep going. So eventually, it will either turn into a 0 down here. Whoops, this is supposed to be a 5, isn't it? 5, and bring down another 0. I mean, it could go on for a long time. So that's why, if this gets strung out too much, the book will say, stop at the hundreds place, or the thousands place, or even the tens place. Don't keep going forever and ever, because it won't end. So as you're doing that, keep that in mind and make sure you look at the instructions so that you're not doing too much. So let's look at another one. 17 divided by, in this case it's 0.03. So that being the case, we're going to move that over 2, so we get 3. We moved over 1, 2. 17 is actually 17 with a decimal at the end of it, and it's telling me to move it over 2 more. So I'm going to move it over 2 more. Well, I don't have anything there, so again, remember, if we don't have anything, you add zeros. So actually what I'm doing is I'm dividing 3 into 1700. So I moved this decimal over 2, and I had 17, and I moved it over 2, which gave me a number of 1700. So you divide 3 into 1700. Alright, so let's look at some problems on page number 387. Before we do that, let's look at example 9 on page 385. Got some applications there. We've got a telephone company charges 43 cents for the first minute. 0.43 for the first minute. And then 0.33 for all other minutes. So after the first minute, you're paying 33 cents. If a long distance call costs $3.07, 3.07, how many minutes was the call? Well, we know that out of this 307, 43 cents was the first minute. So if I take 3.07 and I take that 43 cents off that first minute, or because it was my first minute, I get 4, 10 minus 4 is 6. Okay, so I get $2.64, $2.64. After I paid for the first minute, I talked $2.64 more. Well, how many 33s, because that's how much it is for all of those minutes, how many 33s go into 2.64? So it's 2.64 divided by 0.33. So I divide that out, get my number that I get as an answer when I divide 0.33 into 2.64. The answer to that actually is 8. So what happened is, the question says, how many minutes was the call? Well, it was 43 cents for the first minute, and then I talked 8 more minutes at 33 cents. So 8 minutes plus the first minute at 43 gives me 9 minutes is how long I talked. So in my bill was $3.07. With cell phones and unlimited calling anymore, that usually isn't an issue for most of us, but back in the olden days when it was expensive to make a call, you had to be concerned about that. Alright, so that's 5.4. Let's look again then at problem set 5.4. And that's on page 387. And let's look at numbers 1 through 16. They give you the division there, you just divide through. 17 through 30, they notice how the number that's dividing into the other number is also a decimal, so you need to remember to move that decimal over. For example, number 28, you move the decimal of the 0.052 over 3 to make it a whole number, 52. And therefore you take the 0.23712 and move that decimal over 3. So you're dividing 52 into 237.12 once you move that decimal over. So that's what's going on all the way to page up to problem 44. And then on page 390, the applying the concepts, just doing some basic story problems with some division there. So you should be good to go on that with problem set 5.4.